It never fails. I just didn't want it to be on the...
Okay. Well, I think we ought to get going. I have 12:01. Well, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today for the second session of our Refocus and Rebuild webinar series. This is focused on helping Virginia businesses reopen and during this COVID world that we're in. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I am with Virginia Community Capital, and we are delighted to be a partner. I'm getting feedback right now, but I'm delighted to be a partner with the Virginia Small Business Development Center Network, Gen Edge, the University of Virginia's College at Wise, and the Southwest Virginia Alliance of Manufacturing to present this weekly webinar series. This is a 13-week webinar series that is to help owners, business owners, and leaders build skills and knowledge to manage and grow their businesses while sharing resources to help businesses move forward during the pandemic. If you noticed in your reminder email that you received regarding the webinar today, we provided a link to access a variety of templates and a guidebook to help you as you, over the coming weeks, as you develop your resiliency plan, and I urge you to look at that and refer to that. Before we get started and I turn it over to our host, I wanted to note that to keep the webinar flowing and to stay within our 1-hour goal, we have muted everyone. However, we want to hear from you, and if you have a question for our presenter today, please post those in the Q&A section, and we will provide address those at the end of the presentation. I'm delighted to have a friend, a co-host with me today. Her name is Margie Douglas with the Southwest Virginia Small Business Development Center Network. And I'm going to allow Margie to introduce our presenter, and she will moderate our session. So Margie, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Sandy. It's always a privilege. Hello, everyone. I am Margie Douglas with the Small Business Development Center at Southwest Virginia Community College. The Small Business Development Center Network is a partnership program with the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and our local hosts. And we are here today for the purpose of assisting our small businesses with relevant information for continuing business post-pandemic. We'd like to thank you for joining us for our second webinar of our Refocus and Rebuild series. As discussed last week, having a resiliency plan is key in moving forward. Now more than ever, it's crucial for small businesses to know and understand their finances and all of the ever-changing regulations, knowing about their supply chains, and so much more. Today's topic is how to manage debt post-COVID-19. This presentation is being recorded and will be available afterward. All participants, again, have been muted in order to block any feedback and to keep us on task. However, we do encourage you to type those questions in the Q&A window, and we will get to those. So it is my privilege today to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Mr. Michael Bandy. Mr. Bandy is a native of Tazewell County, and he's a graduate of Tazewell High School. He also graduated from Southwest Virginia Community College. He received his BS in accountancy at Bluefield State College, received his master's in taxation from Old Dominion University, and he is currently studying for his PhD designation in leadership, emphasis of businesses from the University of the Cumberlands. Mr. Bandy is the owner and operator of Michael Bandy and Associates, a certified public accounting firm with locations in Richlands and Bluefield, Virginia. His firm has been serving clients and businesses in Southwest Virginia and West Virginia since 2001. Mr. Bandy is also an associate professor of accounting at Bluefield College and he has a heart for developing leaders that will propel our small businesses in Southwest Virginia and beyond to successful outcomes. So with that, Mike, I would like to give you the podium.
Margie, I sure appreciate that. Thank you so very much. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. If you can see me, before COVID-19, I had a full head of luxurious hair, and now I do not. So I can't blame it on that. But I'm really glad that you're all here. It's a very important topic, building credit post-COVID-19, managing cash flow post-COVID-19. Here's the secret to this. It's really not a lot different than it was before COVID-19. So this is going to be a really a refresher for some of you guys. For some of you guys that are new in business or new in nonprofit, it's going to be an opportunity to cut your teeth on some concepts about why cash management and why credit management is so important. Sandy has agreed to move the slides for me today because I am what you call technologically impaired. So Sandy's going to make sure that I stay on point today. So Sandy, if you would, next slide, please. Perfect. See, she did that so much better than I was going to. First off, Margie said this was an hour. I thought I had 4. I don't have 4 hours? Really? No? Okay. Prepared an 18-part presentation, but that's okay. What we're going to cover today, we're going to cover why credit matters. In business, it is very difficult to be a cash-only business as far as cash inflow and cash outflow. Credit matters. Credit is going to allow you to do things in your business that you can't do just by operating it out of your back pocket. As a result of that, we need to learn how to build good credit. A lot of our nonprofits and our small businesses, the thing that we have to remember is when we're building our credit, it isn't so much that we're trying to get with a credit agency or anything like that. A lot of it is relationship. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what cash flow management is, basically inflows and outflows, talk about what's important, and finally, how to manage cash flow properly. Next slide, please. So why does credit matter? Well, it matters for 3 very important reasons. The most important is one that you probably wouldn't think about, but as small businesses, remember, a lot of our competitive advantage lies with our reputation with other businesses, other vendors, and our clientele and our customers. So the first thing that came to mind when I thought about this is credit matters because it helps you build and reinforce your relationship with other businesses. You get a reputation. We all know of people that pay well with their bills, that pay their bills on time. We also know that maybe we have customers that they don't pay us on time. And we also know that that leaves an imprint in our mind. Well, flip that. What if you're the one that's paying the bill? How apt are your fellow vendors and fellow businesses around you, first to recommend you, or second to do business with you if you don't pay your bills on time? It sounds crazy, but there is an emotional intelligence component to this. Second, of course, it helps keep the lights on. It helps us have our resources. Good credit allows me to buy inventory. Good credit allows me to borrow money to expand, whether it's through capital improvements or maybe making a new location or going into a new product line, things like that. But it also keeps the day-to-day going. If I don't have good credit, I may not have access to resources to help me make my payroll or to help me pay my utility bill, or maybe I need promotion for my business. So it's important that your credit is good so that if you need to dip into that credit, you're able to. And finally, it helps with cash flow management. As we'll see in the cash flow management portion of this, your inflows and your outflows don't always mesh up. And so there may be times when I have to pay for the goods and services that I'm supplying to my customers, but I haven't gotten the inflow yet, haven't gotten the revenue from it yet. So those are 3 big reasons why credit matters. Next slide, please. So how to build good credit. Now, this is not a timeline kind of thing that says, okay, well, if I do this first and then I do this second, so on and so forth. The honest truth, guys, I liked how it looked on the designer. Okay, so I'm just being human, again, technologically impaired. But it does allow us to look down the list. First, pay your bills on time. pay, well, just like we talked about moments ago, when I pay my bills on time, I keep good relationship with my creditors. I keep good relationship with my suppliers. Now, every business, and guys, whether you've been open for a month or 20 years, there will come a time when things are tight. It just happens that way. If there comes a time when things are tight, if you can't pay your bills on time, communicate with your vendors. Especially with post-COVID-19. Right now, you have all of these things that are brand new to us. We're going through things that we've never seen before. Communication is so important that if you're not able to take care of your bills on time, be sure and talk to your vendor. Most of the time, you're going to see they're willing to work with you. I think back to a case I had several years ago. It was a client in North Carolina, and they had been going through some hard times and weren't able to pay me for the services that I was performing. But they had the guts to call me and say, "Listen, Mike, we're on some hard times right now. Hang with us. We really need you to do these services for us so it'll help us get back on our feet." By them reaching out to me and talking to me, it established a rapport with us, and I stayed with them. And they not only paid off their bill, they've become one of my better clients. And it's just because they had the foresight to communicate with me. It means a lot. Third, use your lines of credit wisely. Now, a line of credit, you guys may or may not know, but I just want to put it out there anyway. There may be some things I say, you're like, "Oh, geez, Bandy, it's obvious." Just roll your eyes with me and move on. But a line of credit is basically a revolving loan that you have with the bank. It's not for a set amount. It's for an amount up to, let's say you have a line of credit for $50,000. Well, I can freely borrow up to $50,000 and then pay it back as we go along. And the idea is that I use that line of credit to help bridge gaps of a lack of inflow in my business. But I don't want to use that line of credit for anything other than my business, for one. I don't want to use the line of credit if I have other means. Maybe I can cut my costs. Maybe I can factor my receivables and collect my money a little faster. So the line of credit should be, I don't want to say a last resort, but it should be down the line a bit, so that it's something that's there if you need it. It's a cushion if you need it, but don't use it if you don't have to. Next, we're going to avoid closing credit accounts. Well, Mike, closing credit accounts should help my credit. It shows that I don't have any debt. The credit companies will look at closing a credit card account as a negative, and it will negatively impact your credit score. So you want to avoid closing those accounts if you can. If you do close accounts, important, keep your older accounts open. Even keep them active if you can, because that builds up a credit history with your vendors and with people that use credit scores. It helps keep your credit score up. Next, let's keep our information at the bank current. Make sure that you have a personal financial statement ready at all times. Make sure that you have your tax returns up to date and ready to let the bank have those. If they require financial statements, make sure those are ready as well. Because if you see a new project and you've got to get your bank involved, the last thing you want, especially in post-COVID-19, where things are at a snail's pace where it comes to banks, where there's such uncertainty. If I have my information current in a packet, I can deliver that when my banker asks, "Hey, I need your last year's tax return, your personal financial statement, and the financial statements from the business." I've got it right there. Now, I admit this one's close to my heart. The bottom one is pay your taxes. Now, taxes are not necessarily a debt that will affect your credit report in and of itself. But if you don't pay your taxes and the federal government or the state government files a tax lien, that does go against your credit. And tax liens are really, really hard to get rid of. So the key there, pay your taxes and stay current. Next slide, please. Other things to avoid or to do. Make sure to avoid hard hits on your credit if possible. Now, what's a hard hit? Well, a hard hit is, okay, I've gone to the local car dealership. I need a vehicle for my business, and I'm just looking around. So car dealership says, okay, we're going to check your credit out and see if we're going to finance the vehicle for you. They can either do a soft hit or a hard hit. A hard hit is when they make a hard inquiry into your credit and it shows up on your credit report. Basically, the credit card or the credit companies think, okay, they're looking to extend their credit even further. And that hit stays on your account for quite some time. So don't let them hit your credit unless you're absolutely sure you're ready to buy that asset and you're going to do it by financing. Again, we just talked about keep older credit accounts active. Age does matter. Age matters in experience, and it matters on your credit card report. I'm actually 87 years old. It's the lack of hair that makes me look so young. Keep your credit cards under 30% of available balance. The credit companies don't want to see you extending your credit, and their guideline is basically 30%. If you borrow more than 30% of your limit, start sending up red flags to them. So you can see these things that are building our credit are also going to be tying into how we manage our cash flow. Okay, so by keeping our credit cards under 30%, we're not saying to not ever use your credit card. It's when you use your credit card and you can't pay it off, or you use your credit card and that balance never comes down. That's when we have issues. And so we want to be careful as we build our credit. We're making it better. We want to make sure we don't put ourselves in an issue where our credit scores go down simply because we borrowed too much money or we made a purchase that we shouldn't have. Which leads also to the last part of this section. Check your credit often. Make sure that what's on your credit report actually belongs to you. There will be instances credit companies make mistakes just like we all do. There may be a point on your credit report that shouldn't be there. Challenge it. There may be an issue with the credit report from years ago that should have been washed off and it just wasn't. Challenge it. Check it out. That is your credit report. You have the power to make sure that it's right, but you also have the responsibility to do so as well. Next slide, please. So now we're through the credit part, okay? Look, that was a painless 15 minutes. Everybody's alive. So far, so good, right? But this credit management is going to tie into your cash flow management, okay? All cash flow management is keeping track of your cash inflows and your cash outflows. It's really not that complicated. It's how much did I bring in? How much did I pay out? The problem is we get very nearsighted as we're trying to make our business better. Man, we're out there grinding every day, trying to make sure that our customers are taken care of, our clients are taken care of, vendors are taken care of, deliveries are getting made. If it's nonprofit, hey, we have grant monies, we've received these in, and we've got programs that are dying to have these monies paid out so we can accomplish our program goals. It's very easy to get very myopic and say, okay, I'm just looking at this one little slice. But when we look at it from the 30,000-foot view, it really is about keeping track of how much cash comes in and how much cash is paid out. Doing this involves an understanding of what it is, what cash management is, and how it affects the business. Cash, it's cliche to say, but cash is the lifeblood of your company. If you don't have cash flow, the business will eventually die. I've seen companies with great ideas, fantastic ideas and hard workers, but they failed because they didn't keep proper track of their cash. And the issue there is, and we'll talk about this as we go through how to manage it well, we'll find out that not knowing where you are is going to keep you from getting where you need to go. You have to know where you are in order to get to where you're going in the future. Cash flow is not the same as profit. Now, this is for the accounting geek in me. Profit on an income statement is not the same as cash flow. Let me give you an example. Let's say that Sandy buys a product from me for $100. And she buys the product, but she doesn't pay me right then. She says, I'll pay you in 30 days. Okay. Well, on my income statement, I have a $100 sale. It looks like if I have no other expenses, I've made $100. But she hasn't paid me yet. She won't pay me for 30 days. So I show a $100 profit, but there's still no cash flow. So it's important as you're looking at your income statement, okay, let's bear in mind, that's really not what my cash flow is. To go even deeper into accounting geekitude, you have a balance sheet, an income statement, and what joins those two is a statement of cash flows. That's what shows you how much money you've taken in, how much money you've taken out. A lot of people will put a lot of emphasis on the income statement, but it's the cash flow statement that you really, really want to see. Next slide, please. Challenging times for cash flow, okay? Normally, but there, let's see, wait a minute. Let's back up just one. Yeah, let's back up one. There we go. Normally keeping track of inflows and outflows, that's day to day. How much money deposited in the bank today? Had to pay my bills out. What's left in my checkbook, okay? When business is consistent, this is fairly easy to do, especially if you have a good accounting system put in. Note that I'm plugging our industry. Now, when the business is consistent, things go well. Inflows and outflows are constant. They tend to be complementary. The money I'm getting in is helping to pay for the expenses that I've got to pay on my outflows. The goal, of course, is to have more inflows than outflows, okay? The thing about your business, as your business continues on, the first year it's going to be hard to do because you really don't have anything to compare against. But as you build year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, okay, you're going to be able to compare those horizontally and analyze, okay, what were my sales for year 1, 2, 3, and 4? Did I grow? My utilities expense for years 1, 2, 3, and 4. Did they go up? Did they go down? You're looking for trends at that point. And as you're managing your cash flow, those trends, which we'll talk about budgeting here in just a little bit, those trends are going to give you some insight into how much cash do I need this year? Okay. How much do I need to set back for my advertising budget, for my supplies budget, for my payroll? What if I give my guys a 5% raise? Well, I can look at the past and see 5% more of that is what I'm going to need for the next year coming up. It's no different than at home. You see the bottom bullet point. This goal is the same in a business, at home, and in government. At home, if I bring in salary and my wife, Misty, hi Misty, by the way, you're on the call. I have not messed up yet, I don't think. But if she's paying the bills out and I haven't brought enough money in, she can't pay all the bills. You can't do that for many months and not have your lights cut off, your cable cut off, and then come back and repossess your car. You have to make sure that your inflows match your outflows. Well, the magic question there is, okay, well, how do I make my cash flow better? Well, I either have to, it's very simple. I've either got to bring in more money or I've got to not pay out as much. And this is where understanding your inflows and outflows is so important, because I have to know how much I'm taking in. How can I make that, how can I bring in more money? Or maybe I look at my expenses. We got to tighten our belts a little bit, especially COVID-19. It's making us all look a little closer at what we've paid out. We're not able to get in as much inflow as we had pre-February 2020. Okay, what can I cut? What can I do better? Necessity is the mother of invention. And one thing that we've seen post-COVID-19 is that our businesses have had to innovate at a pace faster than at any other time. The last time I can think of anything like this, and this is just studying history, is after World War II. We were fortunate. We were the golden accident after World War II, because Germany, Japan, Russia, all these other countries were war-torn, but we happened to be okay. So we were able to produce more, and we also bought more. So our economy flourished after that for a period of about 15 years before Japan and Germany caught back up. We're not going to see anything like this with COVID-19. We've had to innovate on the fly, and we've had to find ways to make our businesses and our nonprofits leaner and sleeker. And cash management has become more important now than ever. Next slide, please. There are times that it's inconsistent. Think about this. At business startup, man, you've got a great idea. You've gotten your business plan together. You've talked with your bank. You've gotten a couple of vendors in line. So now you're starting up. It's going to take some time to get some inflow. Maybe you have investors that are going to put money into your business. Maybe you've arranged with the bank. I know when I started my business, we had to get a line of credit and we had to secure it with personal assets. It's difficult to get money starting out. So when that happens, it is so important that we keep a really tight rein on what we're bringing in and what we're spending. We need to make sure that as we're taking that risk, that we're taking calculated risk. Okay, let's not put ourselves out there on such a limb. And again, you'll hear stories of people that totally put all on the line. As an accountant, I have to tell you, it's a calculated risk. Be very careful that you know what you're getting into. Seasonal businesses. Maybe it's a tourist type business or a business that like snow removal. Well, there's no snow in July. If there is, then that's another part of the book of Revelations that's fulfilled in 2020, and we should all make sure we're prayed up. But for most businesses, seasonal businesses have ups and downs depending on what season, what time of the year it is. You have to plan your outflows accordingly. When business is down right now. Even before COVID-19, in our area of Southwest Virginia, maybe not so much in Nova or Richmond or places, but in Southwest Virginia, the move toward green energy and natural and away from coal has been detrimental to our area here. Business is down, and we've had to come up with different ways to survive and to work with our cash flow. And finally, pandemic anyone. This is unreal. If you would have told me in March, when we first heard that June 10th, we were going to be on lockdown to June 10th, I pulled what was left of my hair out saying there's no way we're going to make it. Yet here we are in August. And the neat thing, you guys that are starting your businesses or you guys that are starting your nonprofits, you got a higher vision, mission, and purpose. You've got something in your heart that you believe you're going to make it. And so even with this pandemic that's happened, you have taken the step out to do this. Okay, that heart and that character will bleed over into your business. It will help you innovate. It will help you find ways to take care of your business even in the midst of a shutdown because you're resilient. You have found ways to survive, and you're going to continue to. Next slide, please. Now, to manage cash flow, now we get down to the account geeky part, okay? You got the attaboy, attagirl speech. Now let's talk about managing cash flow. Remember, look at the cash, not at the profit, okay? We talked about that. How do I do that? I've got to set up a good accounting system, okay? And when I meet with clients that are just starting their business and we're starting on their tax return and things like that, I say, guys, got to set up an accounting system. And you can literally see the shroud of boredom come over, and you hear, Mike, just want to run my business, man. I don't want to have to go crunch numbers every night. That's what I have guys like you for. True, but if you're just starting out, you may have to go on your own for a little bit and keep track of stuff. That accounting system could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, but there are very affordable apps out there. QuickBooks, of course, is the one that we use here at our office primarily because it speaks the same language that our clients do. They generally use a Quicken or QuickBooks or some sort of Intuit product. It's basically as involved or uninvolved as you want it to be. It can be a glorified checkbook that helps you reconcile your bank accounts and classifies your income and expenses, or it could be as robust as it's doing your invoicing and keeping track of your inventory. It's as involved as you want it. But I can tell you, whatever accounting system you set up, if it has any semblance of organization whatsoever, it's going to help you see what your cash flow is, okay? At startup, don't go wild with your salary. That sounds obvious, but I have seen people that have started out and have printed business cards and they have CEO at the end of their name. And that's when I know we have a problem, because they've come from working for someone else or doing something for someone else, and now they're doing it themselves. And in the back of their mind, psychologically, man, I should have been getting paid a lot more than what I got paid when I was working for Joe. And so they will pay themselves salaries, which does two things, but big salaries, which does two things. Cuts down on your cash flow, also makes you responsible for the employer part of payroll taxes, which they do not tell you about when you're an employee. But when you're working for yourself, you have to pay your Social Security you withhold, and the company has to match that. So now your Social Security and Medicare amounts double. And once you're liable for that with the IRS, they tend to want it. So you could actually get your business in trouble by paying yourself too much when you first start up, okay? Let that money roll back into your business. As we see toward the end of this presentation, we're going to see that you need to build up a war chest. And by putting money back into your business, you are building up financial flexibility. You're building up fluidity. You're building up the ability for you to see an opportunity and jump on it because you have the capital. That's part of your cash flow management. Over time, as we talked about before, look for your patterns and trends in your income and expenses. Numbers will tell you a story. And when you learn to look at just something as simple as inflows and outflows, you can look at that and tell, is my business doing well? Is it not doing well? How did we look last year? Based on what we've seen over the past couple of months, couple of years, whatever period you pick, how do we think we're going to do in the future? You can get a really good idea of how you're going to look in the future just by looking at your present and your past. Cash flow management helps. Reconcile your bank account. Again, this sounds obvious, like don't spend too much on your credit card, but okay, Misty, plug your ears. Before Misty and I met, as an accountant, I can tell you, the last person that you want to ride with in a car is a mechanic, because that's the last car they're going to want to take care of. The last person's checkbook you want to see is an accountant's, because they have been taking care of everybody else's checkbook for 40 to 60 hours that week. So we don't want to necessarily look at ours because we've had enough for the day. But if you don't reconcile your bank account, the bank makes mistakes, just like we talked about the credit companies making mistakes, just like we do. Something may have been overcharged to your account. A deposit may not have went in. Maybe a check was recorded for the wrong amount by the bank. If you don't reconcile your bank account, you're not going to know if what you show in the checkbook is what shows up at the bank. And we talked about managing credit. Part of that relationship that you as a business want to keep is you want to make sure that you have a good relationship with your bank as well. And bouncing checks is not a good way to keep a relationship with your bank. Also, the $25 to $35 return check fee adds up over time. You will see businesses that don't reconcile their bank accounts, and you will see thousands of dollars in return check charges, and it's insane. That's money that's just been thrown away that could have been used to pay a bill, keep a light on, make a payment, make a tax payment, cover payroll. It's really important to reconcile your bank account. Look over your expenditures to be sure they're legitimate. Okay, in this day and age where we have phishing scams, and back in my day, it used to be the long distance telephone companies that would cold call you, and the not legitimate ones, but the illegitimate ones, the fly-by-nighters that would trick you into saying yes, record it, and say, well, you agreed to that. If you're not looking at your expenditures on your bank statement to see if that's legit, those kind of things sneak by. And before you know it, you paid something for a year and didn't realize that it had been coming out of your bank account. Really difficult to get that back. Next slide, please. Now, a few things you can do as far as your accounting system is concerned, as far as your process and how you run your business to manage your cash flow. Number one, control your inventory. If you don't need to have $100,000 of inventory on the shelf, don't buy $100,000 of inventory on the shelf. It's a dance. It really is. It's figuring out, okay, how much inventory do I need so that I can sell to my clients, my customers, fast enough that they're not waiting for weeks on something to come in. But at the same time, I'm not tying my inventory up and having it, or tying my cash up in my inventory as it sits on the shelf. It really comes down to experience, and it will change from month to month. Think about retail. From November to December, they're going to have more inventory on the shelves for Thanksgiving and Christmas. But after that, come January, they won't have to have as much inventory. So they have to manage their inventory flow based on what they anticipate their cash inflow is going to be, what their sales are going to be, and based on how much they need to have available for clients and for customers. For us that are in service, we don't have a physical inventory, but our inventory is our time. And that goes for nonprofits as well. Your inventory is your time. How much are you spending on a project? How much time are you spending on a project? For me, if I spend an hour on a tax return and I don't bill for that hour, then I've just lost money, even though nothing came physically off the shelf. So it's important to be aware of how much money you have tied up either in your inventory for product-based businesses or in your time for service-based businesses and nonprofits. To follow with that, collect on your receivables. It is very easy to say, hey, I made a sale. There's an invoice in my box. I've recorded it on my sales spreadsheet, just like we talked about the example with Sandy a little bit ago. It's easy to get tied up with, man, I made a sale, but it's not helping me until I collect. And so you have to keep an eye on collecting those receivables. A lot of companies will say, okay, that receivable can hang out. You got 30 days to pay it. Some may let you go a little longer, most don't, because business tends to be on monthly cycles. Think about it. Your utility bill comes in once a month. You may have supplies that come in once a month. Payroll, very rarely. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody being paid in periods greater than 1 month. So you have to have money coming in at least every 30 days. Make sure those receivables aren't getting aged and stale. The report that will let you know that is an accounts receivable aging report, which shows here's how many receivables or how much money people owe me for 30 days. Here's stuff that's been outstanding for 60 days. Here's 90 days. Here's greater than 120 days. Let you know what's out there. Maybe we need to, if on the older stuff, we need to amp up our collection. Let's pay our payables on time too. Again, going back to credit management, paying your payables on time builds relationship with your vendors, builds confidence with them so that they're more apt to work with you. Also, if you have an opportunity to take advantage of a discount, please do so. Maybe I owe Sandy $100 for an invoice, but she tells me if I pay it early, I can take 2% off of that $100. That's a discount. So if I pay it in 10 days, instead of paying $100, I pay $98. I just made $2 on that. And it doesn't sound like much, but multiply that over hundreds of invoices or over months and years. And those discounts can put money in your pocket that you can use for your other operating expenses. The next one's a little hard to stomach sometimes. You got to eliminate unprofitable relationships early if you can. I shared the story about the company from North Carolina that called me and said, Mike, I want to work with you. Or you work with me, and I promise you I'll get you paid. And I agreed to help them. But had they not followed up on that, then you have to cut them loose. And you may have relationships that are taking up a lot of your time or costing you a lot of your money or cost you a lot of your attention, your effort, and your energy that are either not paying or not paying what they should. If that's the case, cut that relationship loose and find the customer or the client that's going to pay you what your value is, what your product's value is, and is going to do it in a timely manner. It's important. Next slide, please. Lines of credit. Now, we talked about them just a moment ago, but let's go just a little more in depth. It's like we talked about before. Sometimes our inflows and our outflows are not matched up consistently. I've got to pay payroll and I've got to buy my product, but I may not have the money from the sale until 30 days to 60 days after. So lines of credit can help us out. Let's say that I fall a little short. I'm able to borrow from that line of credit, put it in my bank account, and use that to cover the outflows for that period of time. Then when my inflows come in to match up from those outflows, I can take that and pay the line of credit back. Think of the line of credit as a bridge between my inflows and my outflows, my income and my expenses. There may be a time when those income and expenses, when they line up like this, everything's cool, everything's together, and everybody's happy. But sometimes they're apart. And we've got this gap here where I've got to get from the money that I've paid out to earn this sale to the time that the sale is being collected. And that's what the line of credit is for. It's intended to be a revolving line of credit, kind of like a credit card, but a much lower interest rate than most credit cards. It allows the business to obtain short-term financing during harder times, but be aware. The idea is to pay off the line during the year, every year. The goal is to make that line of credit, make sure the balance in that line of credit is zero at some point during that year. If you have a $50,000 line of credit and you keep it pegged at $50,000 and all you're doing is paying interest only on the payments and the principal never comes down, the bank's going to look at that and say, we're not managing our cash flow well. We borrowed money temporarily, but we're not able to pay it back. And what they do, if it goes too long like that, is I'll turn it into a term loan. So it's really a term loan, meaning now it's not a revolving line of credit anymore. I can't borrow any money off of it anymore. Now I've got to pay it back over 5, 10, 15, 20 years at a stated interest rate. And now it becomes a cash outflow I've got to account for every month. And it takes away my flexibility. So make sure that you show significant movement on that line, or even better, show that line being paid off at least once a year. Next slide, please. Now, we've talked about the present. We've talked about the past. Talk about the future here for a second. No one likes to hear the word budget, but it's necessary. If I don't plan for the future, I'm not having a good idea of what I can realistically do. Even if you stretch just a little bit and have optimistic numbers, I've got to have something that says I can do this based on what I'm doing now and what I've done in the past. So I've got to make a budget, okay? And how I do that is I develop a report of my projected cash inflows and cash outflows. A lot of times I want to base those figures on prior year information. That's why I'm saying businesses are trends and patterns. My sales my advertising expense one year should be comparable to the next year, So if I'm planning on what the next year is going to be, I can look at the past and have a pretty good idea of what my advertising expense is going to be. Same thing with payroll. Same thing with supplies, any kind of expenditures I have. Ed Christensen, who was my mentor at Amars Incorporated, he was actually Vice President of Finance at Greyhound, taught me how to budget. And he said, Mike, basically when you budget, you take each line item that you're either going to bring in or you're going to spend, and you address that line item. If I'm looking at sales and I compare with my sales for the past 3 years and see they've increased about 2%, based on what I know now, I'll increase my sales by 2%, and I'm done with that line. That's it. Then I'll go to my expenses. What's my advertising for the past 3 years? I'll base it on that. Then when it's all said and done, then you can see my inflows projected, my projected outflows, and see if my inflows are more than my outflows and I've got a surplus, or if my inflows are less than my outflows and I've got a deficit. If I have a deficit, I got to go start trimming stuff. But at least now that budget is based on something realistic, based on the past and what we've done, okay? And the budget's not written in stone, but it does give you a great place to start your planning. You may put the budget out and you sit down maybe with your partner, or you let it get cold and you look at it with yourself and just go over it and say, I don't know if that's realistic for us this year. Been hearing some rumblings in the industry. Maybe we should cut this sales projection down a little bit just to be safe. Or maybe in your expenses you build in a cushion. But at least the budget is giving you a place to anchor. It's giving you a place to start. And that's why having that budget is so very important. You got to know where you are, okay, to have an idea where you're going. Next slide, please. Now, plans are necessary. I get to use my Mike Tyson quote. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And basically that is so true. No plan survives first contact. Man, I can come up with the best plan in the world, and the second that I enact it, there will be a gremlin that pops up. There will be something that changes. There's a saying that every plan that you come up with is useless because the data used to make it is now in the past and is now worthless. I don't necessarily believe that, but the point is true. There will be changes that we have to be aware of. Without a plan, without a budget, without forethought, businesses tend to die. You can't just let your business run and not pay attention to it from a planning standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, from a tactical standpoint. You have to make sure that you are evolving at each and every opportunity that you can, that we're innovating on one hand to stretch yourself even further, but that we are also making sure that what we have in place is working, okay? So it is important that you visit your business plan, your cash management plan, your credit plan, at least annually. I would say even monthly, sit down with your numbers and say, how are we doing? How do we compare to last year? How do we think we're going to do next year? Brings up the concept of black swans. A black swan, the story behind that is back in the Middle Ages, everyone thought that only white swans existed. All swans were white. And so that was the accepted theory and the accepted practice, until in Australia they discovered a black swan. Changed everything. Now suddenly the statement all swans are white didn't matter. But now the fact there was a black swan, first it was totally different, but then it became accepted as a normal way of life. Doesn't that sound like COVID-19? That's a black swan that we have had to face. And since February, since March, we have had to find ways to keep our businesses open, to keep our nonprofits going. Even when money was tight, we've had to find ways to do things, but now that is almost becoming the norm. What's the next black swan? How do we prepare for it? Well, the lesson that this has taught us as far as credit management, as far as cash flow management, I believe, is very similar to how we handled the pandemic. Now, I'm not saying that, bear in mind, I'm not saying how to handle the pandemic, but this is Dr. Mike talking, because I'm not a doctor. PhD hopefully someday, but no way am I an MD. I barely know how to take aspirin. But we do know that even before that washing our hands and staying home when we were sick and not coughing and sneezing on people and keeping our surfaces clean is a good way to stop the spread of any disease or any illness. But now we've kind of taken that as normalcy to overcome COVID-19. When the next black swan comes, we've got to be ready with the methodology of, I've already prepared for this. I've already made sure my cash flow is tight. I've already made sure that I know what I'm bringing in, what I'm spending out. I've made sure that my credit is in good shape, so that even if we face the next crisis, whether it's the 2008 financial crisis, the crash of the real estate market, or if it's another pandemic, whatever it is, we have put aside monies, either in savings or in some other form of fashion, that if we're in that point, we're okay. This time around, we were fortunate that our government got together and created the Ppp loan, created the auto loans, and things like that. And you hope the government will continue to do stuff like that. But what if they don't? Ultimately, we are responsible for our businesses. And that's not to be heavy, that's just to be truthful. Because when it comes down to it and our inflows are reduced because of a pandemic or a crisis, or our outflows go up because maybe of a natural disaster, maybe a fire, whatever it is, we have to have things in place that we're prepared to at least survive until help comes around. Okay. One other thing I want to mention on credit, and I almost let this go by, and I know I'm overrunning my time, Margie. I am so sorry. The thing about small businesses and nonprofits, people say, well, I've got a corporation, so if my loan goes bad, I'm not worried about it. The corporation will take care of it. Your credit score and your name mean more to the bank than your business does. And what I mean by that is I have never had a loan that I've taken out from my business, and I have a line of credit with our local bank here because we're seasoned or we're a tax office. I've had to sign personally for those. So the better you keep your personal credit, the more likely you are to obtain financing or to obtain or to be sought out for a program or anything like that. Make sure that your own personal credit is in good shape. So I missed that point earlier, Sandy. I apologize for that. But at this point, next slide, I am open for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Other than why did they let this guy on here today?
We do have a question, Mike,
Sure.
that will the slides be available in the presentation? And yes, they will be available after our event.
Okay, cool. Is that, will you guys take care of sending that out, or shall I?
Yes, Sandy will do that for us.
Awesome. That's because Sandy's amazing.
She is.
We'll take it out, and what we'll do is we're recording the webinar, and we'll send out a link. It may be later this afternoon or in the morning, but we'll get this to everybody. Okay, amazing. Awesome. I appreciate that. And Sandy, thank you so much for taking over the technological reins and making an old country boy look like he almost knew what he was doing.
Mike, we do have another question.
Yes, go ahead.
What is, well, I've lost it. Sandy, do you see it?
No, it popped up, but it never did show. But
Okay.
what is a good? Oh, go ahead.
What is good shape personal credit score?
A good personal credit score? Well, of course, if you're up around 800, man, the banks love you at that point. Anything below 700 gets a little dicey. Okay, you'll see people in the 640 range and things like that. Interest tends to be higher on those. So I would definitely over 700. 740 to 750 appears to be a pretty good place to land if you can. 800 is man, that's when the banks come looking for you, and not in a bad way. Any other questions?
Mike, I've got a question.
Sure.
Did you help any businesses with the PPP loans when they were trying to get them out in the short amount of time? Did you help any businesses?
We did. We actually processed, or at least helped get together around 40 applications for our businesses in our area. We did.
Question: did you see a pattern of where businesses were not prepared to complete the application in a timely manner because they didn't have all the pertinent information, or when it came down to showing that they can pay that off, where they failed to be able to have the information, either credit or cash flow was not there?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Basically, what we saw with people that jumped on it fairly quickly, those are the ones that tend to have their accounting system together. They had their cash management together because they were able to tell the bank, here's how much my payroll was for the past year or 2.5 months. Here's what my utilities were. Here's what my rent was. Here's what my mortgage interest was. So they were the ones that were prepared got their money faster than the ones that were not. The applications on those tend to go through first time, as opposed to the banker saying, it looks like you're relied on a couple of documents here. And that lack of preparation did cost them some time. As far as paying the loans back, the neat thing about this is that in some ways, we as businesses were almost more prepared than the banks were, because the banks were still trying to figure out what was going on too. And I know our firm, and I'm sure other firms all over the state, probably worked with their bankers to say, this is what the legislation means. Let's work together. Our goal between the banks and us and the banks, people think is adversarial, but in this case it wasn't, because our ultimate goal was to make sure that our clients, their customers, were taken care of. And if they weren't able to get those monies, man, they were liable to close down. So we built a collaborative relationship with the banks to say, this is what the legislation is looking for. In doing that, it helped us, because then we were able to help the clients by saying, here's what we need. You got to be able to give us this. And those that had their accounting systems up to date and ready to go were funded much faster than those that were not.
Mike, we have about 6 more questions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Andrea says, this was a great presentation. I was a bit late joining, but wondering if you can talk about the value of having a relationship with your banker. We saw a bunch of businesses get PPP loans quicker and get their questions quicker than when they personally knew their bank staff.
Right. And right, fair or not, I think that's true. Think about the competitive advantage that service businesses have, especially in small towns. This is a part of a study we were doing in one of our classes on strategic decision making. These are cases that we read and actually worked on a model here in our local area for insurance companies, for other service businesses. The competitive advantage that service businesses have is that they've had relationship with their clientele since they were babies. They grew up together. Their kids played Little League ball together. They go to church on Sundays together. So that competitive advantage of personal relationship surely bleeds over into the business. So yeah, if you have a good relationship with your banker, they're going to be more open, fair or not, they're going to be more open to talking to you or picking up that phone as Mike to Joe, as opposed to Mr. Bandy to Mr. Lewis. So yeah, I believe by part of on credit management, part of building that personal relationship, we talked about emotional intelligence. It's about relationship. Having that relationship with your banker just as well as having it with your vendors is certainly an advantage, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Don Crawford says, Mike, nice presentation. I like the advice about getting rid of bad customers. Most small businesses don't take that step.
It's hard.
And then we have an anonymous remark. Just like for personal emergency funds, would you recommend that businesses maintain some sort of emergency reserve? So,
Yes.
any idea on how much what the range is?
Yes. To back up to the first comment about cutting off unprofitable relationships, that is so hard. That is so hard because when we're in business, we're taught we want to take care of everybody and we want to get in all the business that we can. And we're pouring ourselves into relationships that are not necessarily good for us or maybe even functional, but it's still a client and I'm still doing work. And sometimes we confuse activity with achievement. And yeah, it's really hard to cut off an unprofitable relationship. So I really appreciate that comment. As far as putting back a war chest, and war chest may be too violent of a term in this nowadays. Maybe I should say a cushion, a safety fund, at least 3 months of expenses if possible. I think I like to see 6 if you can, but we live in the real world, and man, that's not easy. Even starting out today and putting something back is going to create psychologically that imperative. Okay, I've put money back. I've started this. I want to keep doing it. So even if you say, well, I don't have 6 months or I don't have 3 months, man, set a day aside. Set up a savings account and put something in it out of every deposit. Set aside something per week, like you're paying a bill. Do anything to start building that cushion, that safety net, so that when this does happen, and it will happen again in some form or fashion, you've got something to fall back on.
Okay. In the chat, we have from Osborne. Given COVID-19, what advice can you give given your suggestion to budget based on last year's lows?
Yeah, last year's information, we talked about trends and patterns. COVID-19 kind of destroyed that a little bit. You almost have to, if you're budgeting for the year coming up, it's almost like starting over. And at that point, you have to almost look at this year, even look at last month or look at the last 3 months. You may have to cut your analysis slice down to a quarter if you have to. But something that gives you some kind of idea of a better idea of what's going on. Maybe using a rolling year is a good idea. Normally your year is January to December, and we're looking at January to December, January to December, January to December. Maybe you simply take if you're creating your budget for next year, maybe you take the last 6 months and then roll it over to the next 6 months for the next one. Instead of taking definitive 12-month parts from January to December, maybe cut it up that it includes the COVID period that we're looking at. Aside from that, I hate to say it may come down to your gut and your instinct, and that's not very business-like to say. But guys, your gut and your instinct, as far as your business is concerned, you know you're there every day. You get up at 5 a.m. every day and go into your business and you see what's going on. Take a moment to look around. See what our inflows are. See what our sales are. Look at other people around you. If you see other businesses struggling, it's probably coming to you too. And if you plan conservatively on your budget, the worst that happens is you're wrong and you bring in more money or you spend less and your bank account does better. So maybe it's the accountant to be talking, but just be a little conservative coming out of this one. Maybe take what you think it's going to be and hit it with 90% or 80% and just say, we're going to live off this. And if we get more than that, all the way up, just like running your house. We're going to live off this. If we do better, we'll set it off to the side.
Cindy asked, what is a good way to build business credit? What kind of cards can you start out with?
Well, the thing is, like we said, with cards, I just only speak for our business. And again, I hope they hear this and they pay me money, like in points on my card. It'd be nice. But basically, you're looking at Capital One. You're looking at other banks that offer. But we use. I mean, not to say this is who you should use, but we use Capital One because their points program was good. Their interest rates are low, and they've been pretty good to work with us. As far as but if any card or any company that you use personally that you feel pretty good about, check with them and see if they have a business card. But remember, the business credit is not as important as far as the report. It's not as important as your credit. Make sure that you're taking care of your personal credit, because as a small business owner, credit companies are going to look to you, and they want to see that you got your ship sailing right.
And I think we have one last comment.
Okay.
I had experience with my bank lending me for the PPP, and the amount was not nearly as much as I requested. This was unfair, and I'm looking to bank elsewhere because of it. So that's just do you have what we noticed when we saw the PPP stuff going on in my cohorts in other states and other areas, the larger banks didn't respond as quickly, as appropriately as the smaller banks did. And what we saw from that is a lot of people saying, I'm leaving Bank of America and I'm coming to, whatever bank we ever, I don't want to name banks, whatever, in Richlands or wherever, because the smaller banks had that competitive advantage of having a relationship with you. And they know who you are, and they'll sit down and speak with you. So yeah, we actually saw that. The bigger banks lost business because of it. The smaller banks were getting it in place. Well, I think that's all the questions, Mike. We really appreciate you presenting for us today. I think it's very valuable information. So again, the copies of today's presentation, the slides will be sent to each of the participants. And we hope that you've already downloaded the template for the business resiliency plan that was provided last week, and that you will include this information in that plan. I think Sandy sent the URL out today in case you did not get those documents. So you should be able to go to your reminder and find the URL and download those if you haven't already. And so next week we will be having at noon on August the 20th, we will be having recovery marketing, reconnecting with your customers, and supply chair review. So this is going to be with Mark Wilson. I think many of you are probably familiar with Mark. He has done presentations for us in the past. And also we're going to be having one of our new SBDC staff members, Patrick Horn, participating. So between now and then, if you have questions, concerns, please feel free to contact us or any of our partners, and we'll be happy to work with you as you develop your resiliency plan. Sandy, I'm going to send it back to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mike, so much for an outstanding presentation. I personally learned a few things and had some ideas. I wish I'd thought about that when I was talking to someone that was in need. But and thanks, Margie, for being our moderator and co-host today. As noted earlier, we will be sharing the slides and a link to today's video that you might want to use as reference, and hopefully you're going to share that with someone else that's in need. Don't forget, there's so much resources out there, especially with the partners, with the Small Business Development Center Network, UVA WISE, Gen Edge, and the Southwest Virginia Alliance for Manufacturing. There's a lot of partners here, as well as myself at Virginia Community Capital. We're here to help you, and our whole objective of doing these is to help not only connect you to new resources, but also provide you with the skills and the training that maybe should, God forbid, another pandemic or crisis happen to your business over the next, I guess now it will be the next 12 weeks. You're going to have some skills that you can develop a resiliency plan that's going to help you and help you get through that. So I hope you'll join us again next week, and please share this information on this program with others. Anything my partners would like to speak up and say? Again, thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody for joining us and spending your lunch hour with us. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.